Okay, so hi Dave.
Carl,
Uh,
nice to see you. Nice to
yeah,
meet
you
you.
too. Yeah, you too. First time. Thanks for making time for the call.
My
As
pleasure.
I've mentioned to you, I'm not introducing you formally. I haven't done any pre-recorded interviews. So if you can get started, just let us know a little bit about yourself, what it is you do, your teaching background.
Sure, thank you. Funnily enough, I did a 4-year BEd in design and technology for secondary education as a degree, and that was born out of my teachers at school, I think. I was born in UK, adopted, and then educated in Hong Kong. And I went to an international school out there. It was, for me, it was very good. I know different people, different things, but I really enjoyed it. And actually, it sowed the seeds for me. I wasn't thinking about teaching at all, to be honest with you. You know what it. But then when I finished my A levels, I thought, well, what do we do? So I ended up going and doing a 4-year BEd in the UK, and then fell into a school which happened to be a boarding school. And from there, teaching design, technology, coaching a bit of rugby and that type of thing. And then once you're in the system, you kind of get hooked up, and then you start to look and see what's out there. So that's how that happened, really, Carl. And then
Okay.
I taught design and technology for I think 4 years, my first school, and then I got a housemaster, went to boarding pastoral, also teaching DT but doing pastoral side. And then I went to my first head of department at a place called Wellington College, and then bounced a little bit. Then we went to France,
Hmm.
got down there in '99 and did about 7 years there. And that was an interesting ride. We'll talk later, but that was my first international taste,
Sure.
apart from my own experience as a student. Then back to UK because our daughters, we made some decisions. They wanted A levels, not diploma, and it just suited us. So we
Mm,
went back to UK, a couple of schools back there, and then to Switzerland about 6, 7 years ago. First
okay.
down near Vaud in Geneva, and now here near St. Moritz, where it's my first assistant head in the international section. But design and technology is what I've taught all of my career, as well as some ICT as well.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. That's about it.
Yeah, very well done. Good. All right. So there's a lot there to talk about. There's a couple of things, obviously, that we want to get into, and I think we'll
Sure.
probably spend the bulk of the time talking about the subject that you teach, design.
Cool.
But there's a few things from your background that I think that are worth touching on. Um, so you have had the experience of being an international student as well as
Mm.
teaching in an international school.
Yeah.
How did you find that? Just the concept of traveling and going to a school in a foreign country. Do you have much memory of that, and how was that?
Yeah, I do actually. When we first, my dad, because of his work, we did what they call two tours. He was on loan from the UK government and then
Mm,
went back again for something else. But when we first went there in about 70, early 70s, I was at a junior school and we were in a hotel for about 8 months. So, and I had to travel at a young age on public transport and things in Hong Kong,
uh,
which really scared the hell out of me
sure.
when we first did it. A bit like downtown Jakarta in a way, just trying to find your
Right.
way and make your way. So, but it was a good experience, and it really helped me as far as school was concerned. Moving, I did all my secondary school there as well as a lot of my primary school.
Right.
I It was a fantastic experience because I never thought anything different about international schools. My classroom
Yeah.
was
Right.
my mates still now, via Facebook, Pakistani, Canadian, Brits, Kiwis, Australians. Sorry if that's a bad thing to say, Kiwis, but guys from New Zealand, Australians,
Sure.
Brits, Americans, and we just grew up with it. There was never any question about something being
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
So, and I think carrying that forward now in the professional side as an educator, as a teacher, yeah, I think that was really useful because you didn't question it. It was just what it was.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine that. That's an experience that I think many people would benefit from. I think it would change society a lot, perhaps, if more people had that kind of a experience early on. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the big thing. I mean, I'm really quite. We won't talk about it now, Carl, but I'm big on anthropology. I think schools should focus on that. But the idea of tolerance.
Mm,
We can look at racism, sexism, blah blah blah, and all those things which are thrown into the mix now in schools.
yeah.
Uh, it wasn't something that I was aware of until actually I came back into teaching, and then someone would say something, and you think, well, that's just normal, isn't it? And
Yeah.
you
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and that was for me, that was the eye opener from a professional side. I mean, when I was at Middlesex, over the 4 years, you do 2 years, and my training for teaching was in state schools in North London, around Tottenham and Edmonton. So it's a really quite a hard, bruising and really enjoyable experience, predominantly black in some areas, predominantly
Yeah.
white in others, and a real cultural mix. And it was, but I didn't really think anything of it. You just cracked on with it.
Yeah.
And it was
Right.
only
Sure.
later on as you move through, and yeah, I think tolerance is the big thing there. You
Yeah.
have tolerance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right there. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, it's easier developed through experience than just from a curriculum, I think. Right.
Yeah, because I wasn't. It was the norm for me. That was the norm. It
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah.
That. So you could say I was lucky or just fortunate or just the way it was. But I was certainly very grateful for the opportunity that my family, my mum and dad gave us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously they were selfish for doing it for their work,
Yeah.
but
It all
come
came
on,
out in
kids,
the
let's
wash.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
no
Yeah. No,
choice.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but what it gave us, we were able to visit and travel a lot of the world, which was really lovely, and that opened up and that cultural diversity and just I think an appreciation for what you're still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a bit of a
cool.
freeze there.
It's an appreciation for cultures, and that's something which certainly now in my role, I'm really keen on trying to get that awareness. We're
Yeah,
all in
that's
the same
good.
boat wherever you come
Yeah.
from, and that's been really good.
Yeah, that's really good. Just also while we're on that subject of your international experience, and now that you're teaching, and you've taught in a few countries now,
Yeah,
um, is there anything that you think because of your experience teaching in uh, well, studying in Hong Kong and then teaching now in Europe, do you think that's given you any particular unique perspective on things about the UK education system that maybe people might not be aware of? I know, and I'll give you the
yeah,
floor first, but I know, having spent a bit of time here in Indonesia and spending time in the schools here, not for the sake of comparison, but just you realize, oh, okay, different countries do education differently, and you obviously notice things about the country that you're moving into, but it also opened my eyes a little bit about some of the things that I would have been oblivious to during my own years in school in the UK as a student. And then once I moved overseas, I might have thought, oh, okay. Is there anything that comes to mind for you like that?
that's a good question, actually, Carl. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, my first experience was in France, and but it was an international school in totality, which it was an international school, but it was basically set up to support Airbus employees. So it was an
Okay.
English speaking curriculum predominantly. We did Key Stage 3, IGCSE, and then we did diploma, IBO diploma at the top end. So it was like a fee paying state comprehensive, for want of a better term, really. That's how that was. The school I'm in now, it's quite different because it's an international boarding school, but we offer the Swiss Matura as one stream. So about 120 of our students do that, and then we've got the international side, which is kind of IGCSE
Yeah. Okay.
diploma, and that has been a real eye opener for me. And I think the key thing, and you highlighted it in your chat with Heidi the other day, Carl. What I find as having done my degree in the UK and taught a little bit in the UK, you find, like you said, with language, I find myself gap filling to help support students from other cultures more than some of
Yeah.
my colleagues will. There's an
Sure.
expectancy that the student will, you listen, you learn, and you go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I find myself giving more pointers and trying to give them that little bit of route to follow. And that scaffolding is something I think
Yeah.
which you bring to the game, because I valued it. And it is a little bit about language, but it's also just about the mentality you bring to it. Me
Yeah.
standing in front of a group of students, preaching to them about design, I can do that all day long and bore them to tears, but they have to understand it. And if you
Right.
have to, does that make sense?
No,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, there you say that came up with Haida as well. And I still haven't worked out the reasoning behind that, because there's not a lot that we can really say positively about the Brits and our sort of, our approach to traveling and spending time overseas. We're not the most, we're not the most gracious of guests, I think. But there is something that, in my experience, I've seen here and in the UK, when various cultures meet, there's something about the way that Brits seem to communicate, where we do seem to be particularly helpful in communication. There's been my experience. I don't know where that comes from, because it's not characteristic of us as travelers, I think, but it seems to be relatively true as far as I've seen. The Brits tend to kind of provide a little bit more support when there's a gap in communication. I don't know
Yeah,
why, but it's
it would be disingenuous of me to say it. In the school I'm at, we have colleagues from a range of backgrounds. We have quite a lot of British trained teachers in the school, a lot of local Swiss German, Australians, and so on and so forth. But the Brits certainly will go a little bit that extra mile to try and pull the child along.
Yeah.
And that's, as I said, it's not. I'm not being dismissive of others. It's just the way that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
You said it's a cultural thing, I think. And it's almost like the same, we take the mix sometimes when we see Brits abroad and they go, do you speak English? Expecting the loudness and the clarity of the word to suddenly make, oh yeah, of course I do. It's fine. So yeah, but I get you on that. And it's, I can't explain it. No answer, sorry.
Yeah, no, same me. I've thought about it for a while now, but I can't work it out at all. It's just one of those happy things. My camera keeps dropping out here. I don't think it's a problem though. Yeah, and then you talked about obviously there as well the aside from the communicative aspect of that in teaching as well, and I would hope that this is not so much an English thing and just a kind of a competent teacher thing. The role that we play in, as you say, making sure that what we're teaching is being understood, and I think that that's something worth spending a bit of time on, because I talk a lot about that, and I think this might touch on some of the points that we want to get to anyway. The gap between what I like to refer to as the teaching learning gap, the gap between what the teacher is teaching and what the students are learning. It's one that we hope that gap is small, but that gap is there. It's an unavoidable gap. It can be uncomfortably large sometimes, but it also is something that a lot of teachers that I've met and worked with are kind of unaware of. And certainly the more traditional approaches to teaching and the more formal classrooms that, that you and I might have been familiar with, the students ourselves, the teacher's assumption is that what I teach is what the students learn. And if I have done a good job of teaching, then I can assume the students have learned. And I've become acutely aware of the fallacy there and the need to know and be sure that students are learning what you want them to learn and that there is that gap there, which I think you're alluding to there as well. I mean, what do you have to say about that? What's your experience or your observation been?
I think it's something at the moment in the forefront of everyone's minds, especially with the online learning that's been going on.
Yeah, right.
I think it's forced not just schools but teachers to think more carefully about what they deliver and how they deliver. I mean, there was certainly, without a shadow of a doubt, seeing it with colleagues in our place, the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes with online has been massively significant. And we try to maintain the same timetable we've maintained the timetable without changing. But I think what teachers are now looking at is you don't have to spend 40 minutes or whatever your lesson time is on a camera, talking to kids, students, sorry, whatever the correct term is nowadays. So for me, it's a 10-15 minute intro.
Yeah,
you can shut the camera down. They're in the background. They can use chat, depending if you're on team chat or whatever. Come back to it. But how that works, that kind of process, I think, has been reviewed and refined by many teachers globally at the moment. And I think, if you go on the forums, as I'm sure you do, like myself, are we going to have exam-based curriculums moving forward?
Right,
Is there going to be
right.
They're going to be shown that we can't? And for me, the bigger picture in this is how I think we need to reverse engineer it with universities. Sorry, we'll go on to something else. But what universities in the world, all the world of work want, not everyone goes to university, and that's cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What they want, and then working backwards. This is quite fluid now. How are they going to look at the students that we prepare from schools?
Yeah.
And what skills do they want to have going up? And for you, it's probably slightly more, dare I say, poignant in your field of languages, because the expectation that universities and the world of work want in terms of the ability to communicate. For me, languages are massive,
right?
Almost irrespective of discipline that you have, whether you're you're good at sciences, maths, or whatever. But I think coming back to your point, I think teachers now are reviewing that gap you're talking about, because the chalk and talk mentality, and I see it in different cultures again. You see it here in Switzerland.
It's pretty universal, I think. Yeah,
I think it is. And again, it's I think ICT's played a big role. I mean, I was quite lucky going back, as I said, in the late 90s. You know, the idea of having a desk at the front of your classroom and everyone sitting in front in rows is something that was kind of the norm in some of the schools I worked in. But then when I met this, we were ICT and it was a flipped classroom. Teacher's desk was at the back. You can see all the laptop screens. You walked and moved about. And so the complete management of class was different. And also the way in which the kids engaged was different too. They weren't on their laptops all the time, don't misunderstand me. But I think, you know, you could easily stop, sit down next to a student, have a chat. It wasn't just, oh, crikey, I've got to get through this because my lesson plan said I've got to cover this and this. There's more ebb and flow now, I think. And I think online facilitated that too. I will stop.
I had never thought of that, so I'd be really interested to see. I mean, I don't know if I'm not sure if you're suggesting that this was a big movement, or if it's just something you observe. I'd be interested to see, or to get your take, just a little bit more elaboration. I'd never thought of the relationship that you've just mentioned there, that when we're teaching computers, the teacher wants to be behind so that they can see the screen rather than in front, because then you're looking at the back of a computer. I wonder if that did play a large role in the movement of the teacher, because I mean, you know, the model that we're familiar with is the teacher being kind of chained to the front of the classroom, and it's certainly something that I face a lot here with the teachers I work with. The eye-opening idea for so many teachers, oh, I don't have to just stand here, I can move around. Also the teacher's desk, whenever I'm working in schools, one of the first things I do is get rid of the teacher's desk, just shove it into a corner somewhere, and the teacher will kind of walk in and they'll be lost and not know what to do and where to put their, you know, where do I sit? You don't need to sit. It's kind of they get used to it very quickly, but it's such a new idea. But I wonder, moving the perspective because of the way that a laptop is set up, I wonder how much of a role that's played for teachers getting more mobile.
I think it has, but your point is really interesting, because, you know, in a lot of traditional classroom setups, you got your rows of things, and if you change that, when the students come in and say, "Oh, what's happened? What's going on in the lesson?" You know, that was my seat. There's none of this kind of, you know, just sit down, guys, just crack on. You know, there's not all the time. But the two things which early on in my career I noticed quite a lot of when ICT came into play. The first thing was that management of the classroom. The biggest number of dealings with staff I have is, oh, little Johnny was on the social media when I was teaching. I said, well, what did you do? So being behind and looking at the screens, it's a very easy way. It's like when you're in an exam invigilation. If you know, you'll stand at the back so you can see the students don't know where you are. And you're not trying to catch them out, but it's an easy way. You know, they know they've got to be on task because they dare not move off. And it's exactly the same with ICT. And the second thing, which was an ICT base, is when you go in and look at classrooms, and I did some inspection work some years ago for a few years. It's amazing how many classrooms have some really excellent resources stuck on the wall behind. And the kids never see it, because if you turn around, they get told off. Sorry, I just did it to you. But they get told off by the teacher turning around. You said, yeah, but the good stuff's over on the
that's
back.
right.
You know, and it's a bit like hospitals. They put all the good graphics at waist height, but most people go in horizontal on the tray, looking at a white ceiling. It doesn't make sense.
The irony, I suppose, of, as you say, having that material, whether it's the bookshelf or the resources box or whatever it is, back of the class where it's out of sight, because we know that the teachers will be distracted by it. Reason being because it's more interesting than what the teacher's teaching. So I mean, the response there should be either teach something more interesting, or make use of these resources. You know, when you've got a group of students who are interested in something, and you say to them, yeah, that thing that you're interested in, ignore that. I want you to focus on me and the things that you're not interested in instead. It seems to just be, you're setting yourself up to fail there, I think. And that does seem to be just so much of the thrust of formal education. Okay, stop with the things that are distracting you. Put the phone away, put your books away, stop looking out there. So everybody put your eyes on me. And you have to keep reinforcing it because they don't want to watch you. They're not interested in you. It's just this kind of insistence on doing the most boring thing in the room. When, as you say, there's so often there are resources around that could be used. Yeah, an interesting point that I think maybe um, once teachers become aware of that, you'd hope it would have quite a big impact.
And I think in over the past decade, it's been quite you still there?
I am here. Yeah, my sound and everything's fine. I don't know, my
No, that's cool.
computer
Sorry.
just, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think over the past decade, there's been a slight change in that. You see more, I've seen it in some schools where you go into the business department and it's, the chairs and desks are in around because that's kind of really, it's cool. And
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
and you go into some formal, I won't say languages, but it could be maths or some other more core curriculum subjects where it
yeah,
is in your desks, students are there, eyes down, listen up, that's the whiteboard,
yeah,
listening and go. And then you go into design where, like for me, you design studio, you've got laptops, iPads, you've got paper, whatever it might be. And it's quite a fluid environment. But that's the mentality of what you've been taught with. So because I trained in
yes,
DP, the classroom was never a fixed area to work in. There
right,
was always a bit of fluidity in terms of what was going
yeah,
on.
right, of
It
course,
didn't bother me if little, Jemima stood up and went to get something without me telling her because I assumed
right,
she did it because there was a need.
yeah,
And
right,
so, but for others, it will really rock your boat if a student does something. Well, what are you doing? What, listen,
yeah,
listen. And that's a complete change, I think, which is happening now. And ICT, the big question for me now, Carl, is when we go back into the routine over the next month, or in September for some schools, how will teachers? What I don't want them to do is drop all this ICT use.
yeah,
ICT is just a tool for what they want to do. But
yeah,
I don't want them to suddenly say, right, that was just the 2 months and now we crack on.
yeah, yeah,
How we help weave that mentality back in
yeah,
is
that's right, yeah,
how schools work.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
going
I
to be
think so
interesting.
too. And for me, I mean, I completely agree with you. For me, the emphasis on the IT element of it is actually less important. I mean, it happens that all of this is taking place online, and so IT is playing a big role. For me, that is the medium of it is a little bit less interesting. It is, for me, it's the dynamics of it. So whether it's done through a computer or not, or any other medium, um, there must be some things that teachers are realizing now, um, because they're forced to do things differently, which they
Yeah.
were forced to do against their will, perhaps in the first place. Many of the teachers didn't want to be put in this situation, but now that we are in this situation, a lot of teachers, I know I am, and a lot of teachers must be recognizing things that are working better than they expected, and perhaps some small elements are working better than they were in the classroom. Whether it's because of the IT or because of the change in scheduling or the freedom, the various different aspects of this current circumstance that are contributing to better learning for some of the students. It would be, I think, it's not unfair or extreme to say it would be a tragedy if teachers return to the classroom a couple of months from now and just ignore all of these little things that we've seen that could enhance the learning. Now let's just get back to the way things were, which is a thing we've seen before. This return to the normal, return to the way things were, is almost a natural pull for people. But it would be a tragedy, I think, if people didn't take this as a time to take stock and see what can then be incorporated. Okay, I'm back in the classroom, but I really enjoyed the way this worked, or I really think that would be a better way of doing things, and how can we incorporate that into the classroom?
Totally agree. It's the best kind of, for many schools, this situation, this extraordinary situation has kind of pulled forward digital strategy in most
Yeah.
schools by about 5 years.
Yeah,
But the fantastic thing is, it's a fact, but
absolutely. Yeah,
the fantastic thing is the best CPD, the professional development we could have offered any teachers, because as you quite correctly said, going back into the classroom, back into school again, hopefully the review of what's just gone on for the past 2 months, that was really cool. I'm going to keep that. That didn't work. I'll leave that.
right.
I now appreciate being in front of screen a lot of the time, and I'm expecting students to work on laptops and do what. No,
Yeah.
that's not such a great idea. Possibly, is the ergonomics good? They need to shut down and
Right.
stand up and walk around a bit, or
Right.
whatever you decide to do. And for me, especially, it's like if a student walks into a classroom and opens up their pencil case, going old school, whether they take out a laptop, a mobile phone, pen and paper to do the essay, I actually don't care. They can use
Good. Yeah.
and there's a time when we can direct them. We need you to do this because I'm doing computer-aided
Yeah.
design, or I'm, we're doing some audio visual in languages, but as long as they get the thing done. And I think that's the thing which I'm hoping this whole period of not change, but this period of uncertainty for many colleagues, some of them duck to water, will open their eyes. It's just a tool. It's just a way of, we've accessed it this time. We might have, there might be someone when we get a James Bond type situation, someone hacks in and we have no more electricity for a couple of months. What do you do? Go back to paper and pencil again. Rock and roll, by candle. You just have to.
And there'll be some element as well of not knowing what exactly is happening on the other end of the call, right? So like when we're on a video call like this now, sure, I mean, we can make eye contact and we can have a productive conversation. And because there's only the two of us on this conversation, we can stay relatively focused. But when you've got a class of X number of students where you can't really maintain a proper level of focus on all of the students at all times because they're around the screen, and you also can't really see, right? So you can see that little box that the person's face is in, but you can't really see what they're doing, what's going on with their hands. And so there will be elements of me as a teacher not knowing exactly how the student is tackling certain tasks, whether they're typing or writing with their hand. I might not know whether they are, sitting quietly because they're thinking, okay, sitting quietly because they're thinking about the answer, or sitting quietly because they're reading an entry on the internet to give them some inspiration. I won't always know what's going on. And there's an element of that is a loss of control, perhaps, for the teacher, and they might see that as a loss of control and be fearful of that. But there's also, again, hopefully a recognition there that, well, okay, I don't know exactly what they're doing on the other side of the call, but it seems to all be going okay. And a realization that maybe 100% control isn't absolutely necessary for effective learning. A little bit of freedom isn't going to do any harm. And maybe when the students get back, we can just give them a little bit more freedom because they've had freedom for months and done okay with it.
That's wow. It's a really good point, Carl. I think the elements of anxiety that creep in for some teachers is I hesitate to say trust, but it is, what's Carl doing now while I'm talking to him? And there's two things driven by that. There's obviously are they looking at something that they shouldn't be looking at, and that type of thing, or are they sending an inappropriate email or text or WhatsApp or whatever it might be.
Right.
But there has to be an element with this where there has to be an element, there has to be trust.
No way of knowing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And there is an element of risk, but I actually quite like that. I mean, with everything in education, like elsewhere, the vast majority, 95% of it works really well. It's cool. It's only that 5%, I don't know if it's accurate, but there's a small bit at the end who, if they're in the playground, they do something wrong, or they're the ones breaking the fire alarm, or they're the ones, but it's the minority. It's not the majority. The majority are getting on really well. And I've been really impressed actually with the way students, not just here, because we homeschool our youngest 16-year-old girl. She's homeschooled. They get on with it. They are diligent. They are interested. And when they're at home, there can be distractions. I mean, if I haven't been teaching this year, but if I've got a class going on and I log on to Teams and I've got my class D15, whatever the hell it is, and you're talking to them and they're all on kind of in swimming pool in these foldable chairs with a bottle of beer. Yeah, I know that's not right.
Something doesn't add up.
So I can say something about it. We had an interesting one actually, Carl. It was just sorry, I won't go on too long, but
no, go ahead.
About dress code. We expected the same dress code. So if a student comes online and they've got a baseball cap and kind of San Miguel across their shirt or something, that wasn't appropriate. So they have to go, But again, we could be sitting here with no trousers on, and
no one would know, right? Yeah. So why were you interested in the dress code? Why did that matter so much?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It was driven mainly, I think, by colleagues who were, no, that's not true. Before we did this, we met we were lucky, we had unusual holiday. We had a week, about 2 weeks before this was going to hit. And we planned actually we felt we planned quite well on this. And we met the whole week to go through. And one of the things was what we expected in class, in normal school, we expect it online as well,
Right.
you know, so our
Right.
etiquette was the same. Use of language, appropriateness of dress. We just
Sure.
wanted to keep the same thing. And that
Yeah, I think that's
included the
reasonable.
kind of the P's and Q's, you know, the
Yeah, yeah,
politeness,
yeah, yeah,
you know, more,
yeah.
morning, Mr. A, how you doing? I'm good, thanks. How are
Hmm.
you?
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
that type of thing. So the dress code came in as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, some schools, we don't have a dress code as such at our school other than non-slogan shirts and everything. There's no uniform.
Right. Okay.
You know, now, whether schools want to insist that students are in uniform when they're at home, I would suggest probably not.
It would be a
But there was
strange one. Yeah.
baseball caps on, smoking a
Yeah. I see.
cigar or
Yeah.
something. No.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I see. Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Also, you were a little bit apprehensive, I think, when you used the word trust there. But
mm,
I 100% think this is a conversation about trust. And
mm,
it came to my mind also when you were describing the design room. You know, the
mm,
for us when I was at school, we had the design room, and design and technology was the subject.
yeah,
And so there was the room with the computers, and there was the room with all the machines, and there was the room with the drawing tables, and there was the room with the art materials. And our design tech area was about
yeah,
4 or 5 interconnected rooms with doors between them, sliding doors and things like
yeah,
that. And by far the most dangerous 5 rooms in the building, right? Because there were, high-powered machines, and there were saws and hammers and blades
yeah,
everywhere and nails. And by
yep,
far the most dangerous area of the school. And yet it was the one area of the school where students were expected to stand up and walk into another room, and the teacher might not be there.
mm,
And there was
mm.
it's a trust thing. In another room, in the English room, where the most dangerous thing you can get is a paper cut. You're
There are
controlled.
lots of
You must, right? Well, that's true. You must stay in your seat. You can't get up and walk around. If you're talking to the wrong person, it's a distraction. Meanwhile, in the tech room, where you could do yourself some serious damage, it was just perfectly expected that students would be walking around. If you wanted to go and cut something, you'd go and cut something, and then you come back. And it was a trust thing. And for some reason, that trust was it was mutually understood in the tech room, but it didn't transfer outside of the tech room.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stand up for my colleagues here. I think design technology teachers who've done it from day start are extremely good at educating the students in their care. So there's a
Yeah.
trust, but also an education against the risk and the risk assessment that they do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All the students are very well prepared
Yeah.
for the machines or the processes that
Yeah.
they're going to get involved with. And
Yeah, you're right.
it's for me, it also smacks into this thing about really upset when I see schools, UK and elsewhere, they want to ban mobile phones. The mobile phone isn't the issue. Social app's
No.
not the issue.
No.
It's educating parents and students and colleagues, teachers, to use it appropriately and at the right time. And that's
right,
the issue. It's not the
Yeah.
product.
No.
And the people banning it does nothing to educate the child, the teacher, or the parent on how to use
No.
it appropriately.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's where your point, Carl, I think is right. I think design teachers on the whole, I mean, as I said, I've coached rugby for many years, sports field as well, the
Yeah,
discipline
same
there,
thing. Yeah, of course.
the same thing. And arguably also in science labs. But the funny thing is in schools, certainly with leadership, you always have a science technician who's an extra pair of eyes to support.
Yeah.
Now, lots of design technology departments have that as well.
Sure.
Don't misunderstand me. And I've seen it in performing arts as well, with theatres, have theatre technicians as well in many schools. But there's an extra set of eyes, and that's quite important. But there has to be an element of trust. But you don't put a child into a situation unless they've had the appropriate education and
That's
training.
right. Yeah, that's such an important point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly point out, and I am now remembering, very clearly, as you say, safety was an explicit part of the curriculum, right? So when you used a particular tool for the first time, it would be introduced to the group, and you'd be shown how to use it safely, and from that point on, you would know how to use it. And yeah, you're absolutely right about that thing.
And that's the thing that I think we miss in many schools of ICT use. If I just
Yes, you're so right.
As an analogy, I can get a youngster on a bicycle with training wheels. I can show them how to use the brakes correctly, helmet, elbow pads, whatever it is. Take the training wheels off in the car park, all safe, everything's fine. There's nothing to stop that child from going down the wrong way on the motorway when I let them go.
Right.
That has to be part of the education process.
Sure.
That is not.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And with ICT, it's the same. We smothered,
Yeah.
students and teachers with this equipment.
Yeah.
And actually that kind of, I learned a lot when I did this thing in Toulouse. It was a new school, new build. All the teachers were employed for the whole of the summer, specifically before it opened. And we had 6 weeks of non-stop training. There were no ICT technicians in the school, but we
Right.
were given, we did the ECDL and all the rest of it, the computer license. But we were also shown how to, to fix things and do things. So photocopiers, printers. So we were all proficient in using ICT. So when the students arrived, we could just focus on the teaching and not why doesn't my mouse work, or why does that camera or that interactive whiteboard not work. And that's something schools forget. And the way to do it, when you invest with schools, and they get it wrong every time, I think, it's a third on hardware, a third on software, but a third on that kind of training and professional thing for the teachers and also for the students. You give them a bit of kit, show them how to use it responsibly and carefully.
Yeah,
and then
you're so right.
Yeah.
No, you're so right. I mean, I hadn't even drawn that connection. As you say, I mean, we think about the way tools are introduced in the tech room and new equipment in the sports, in your PE classes, right? And then the computer doesn't seem to be treated the same way. And I wonder if, there's two things that you made me think there. First, on that point, I wonder if it's just this assumption that the kids all have computers at home. They already get it. I think there's some assumption there that they don't need it because they already have them at home, which of course is an unfair assumption because they have one at home, but who's taught them how to use it? And then the other thing that I was just thinking as well, is for the teachers, from the teachers' side, there's got to be something important about the fact that for most teachers, or for a lot of teachers, I should say, what the subject that you're teaching will be something you have a background in, something you studied, something you're familiar with. And if you're a science teacher, you'll be familiar with the science equipment. And if you're a sports teacher, a tech teacher, and so on. But unless you're an IT teacher, which is studying the subject of IT and teaching IT, because we expect IT to be incorporated into other subjects. We expect the teachers to be using IT as a medium for teaching as well. Many of the teachers won't really be familiar with, because it's peripheral apparatus to them. It's not part of their subject. It's not something they're going to be familiar with. And there's got to be something important about the fact that, many teachers coming from a background where when they were at school, teachers weren't using this equipment. So they don't have the experience, the way that most teachers pick up their good and bad teaching habits from their teachers when they were younger, right? But there weren't computers around when a lot of teachers were in school. And so there is no point of reference. And so if you're a teacher, you might have a background in the subject. You might have a teaching degree. You might have done a PGCE or some equivalent to that. So you're up on the teaching, but no one's ever prepared you for the IT method of teaching, that as a medium of teaching. That's got to be an important factor, right?
It's a massive factor, I think, Carl. And if you think about, I can't remember what the figures are now. Is it 200 million students or something went online quickly? Most teachers dropped straight in, boom.
Right.
I've got a class of 15, 20, 25 students. I'm using this thing called Zoom or Teams. Other products are available, whatever I'm using to teach. And, I haven't, I haven't used a laptop really before. I've had a desktop PC and suddenly I'm in my kitchen trying to do this. And one of your followers was Amy, watching her in Geneva, going through the whole process, and she's ICT proficient. But the variables that you have to deal with when you're online. No, I think it's massive. And ideally for me in schools, I'd like to get rid of this idea, you go to room 101 for a double period on a Thursday morning to do IT. It's a waste of it's a waste of facility. All teachers use it as they need. Some teachers don't have to use it.
Right. That's it. Yeah, that's it. I definitely think that's
admin. Admin or something, but they don't actually need it. I'm thinking of, performing arts, for example. Areas of visual arts, sure, there's fantastic graphics package, Adobe and whatever, but use it as you need, like you do a pen or a pencil. What color do I want? It's that type of thing. And that's where we need to get to, I think. We need to get rid of this. We need to give them a foundation very early on in the equivalent to Key Stage 2, I suppose, whatever it is, or 3. But let's be honest, most kids, you give them a phone, the box goes away. They don't sit there and look at a manual. They're straight into it. Whereas me, I'm kind of going, page 7, what's next? The kids are already firing away and taking photographs. They're sponges and they can use it very effectively. And I think going back to your point about what I said about trust, there's a fear for many teachers that, they must be doing something wrong with it. No, they're actually doing most things really competently well. And actually, they can help us to develop.
Chances are they're 3 steps ahead because they're using the tech in a way that's helping them, where we're perhaps being kept back on the other side of it, because we don't know what they're doing and how they're doing it. So we tell them to stop doing it. Meanwhile, they're approaching it far more efficiently than the teacher is, perhaps. No, that's definitely true.
No, it's true. It might be hacking into the school mainframe, but we'll deal with that at another time.
Always a possibility, of course.
Always a possibility.
Also, when you were describing the characteristics of the tech room, and based on
Design,
based on the environments that you teach in, and some of your experience as a teacher, I'm really interested, and this is something that it'll be interesting to see how we have a parallel here, because I think about this from my field of English as a foreign language, which is where I spend most of my teaching time. And then for you in the design room as well. These, to me, seem to be two subjects that are treated in isolation a lot of the time. So there are things that we do in the language room. There are methods of teaching that are appropriate to language. There are all of these kind of characteristics of the language classroom, and it's kind of treated as this different type of subject. And the longer that I spend in the field, and the longer that I spend working with schools outside of EFL as well, I work with a lot more teachers now in other subjects, the more convinced I am that everything that's good about EFL teaching should be brought into the other subjects. The ways that we teach, the methodologies and the pedagogy, the things that we somehow seem to know in EFL that are, for whatever reason, not known in the other subjects, but the same principles carry across. And I feel that there's the same can be said for the design room. There's so much that you say, oh, but that's design, that's technical, that's what they do in the design room. But I wonder what you think about how many of the characteristically unique principles of design as a subject and the design room as a space in the classroom, how much of that could be or should be applied across the subjects?
Oh, this is a good vein to get into. Come on, Carl, this is good. The first thing on languages, I think languages are probably the most, I'm probably going to shut down in flames here, are the most important area of school activity that we need. And I've married a French girl, got 2 daughters, they're bilingual. And irrespective of, as I said earlier, of discipline, if they've got languages, the world is almost an oyster to a certain extent. Depends on your language. I mean, we have Romansh, and if you've got Welsh,
sure.
Just a Welsh college, but it's just I think it's very crucial. But my wife and I have worked in 4 schools together now, and we've done a lot of projects together where we've included languages all the time, and it's been quite natural. So, for example, you do a project at Key Stage 3 on interior design, and all the students, I introduce them to computer-aided design, SketchUp or what have you. Then the students studying French will come in, and they have to label all the things in the house in their native language, then in their second language or third language, and then the English first speakers come in and do, and so you share and develop vocabulary and things like that. I know it's very kind of tentative, but it's but we did work across like that. Glossary of terms. When I started my first real experience of delivering as a teacher in a foreign country, when I was in France, we everything, I did everything in French and English. So in Clark we delivered in French and English, and that was a choice. Right. It was partly to help me try and improve, and the kids could shoot me down because I was terrible at French.
Sure, yeah.
But also it integrated the use of language. So around the corridors, kids would shoot the breeze in mainly French and English, just as a natural thing, as would staff. And that was so integral to the whole thing. From a design standpoint, I mean, I've worked in schools where internationally, where the center of a new build school is design and technology, and off it radiates the sciences, arts, and so on and so forth. And I've been in schools where the big hub of the school is here, design is right over there. And,
right.
And so I think one of the things I've really come to appreciate about my subject in recent years is it's the idea of anthropology being, the study of humankind being central to what education's about. It's not about technology. I hate the word now, I really do, because we all use technology now. You can argue about mechanisms and physics and design.
But I want to interrupt there, if you don't mind, just because something kind of humorous the other day in a training session that I was doing. We were talking about technology, and we talked about like watching videos on YouTube. And I said, for many of us, our memories in school will be like the teacher wheeling in the TV on wheels, right? And we got thinking to myself, well, hold on, what does the word, like, where do you draw the lines, and where does the boundary move when we use this word technology? Is the TV on wheels, is that still technology? I mean, it is, right? But no one, when you say technology, no one thinks in their head, oh yeah, like a TV on wheels. That's like pre-technology now, because now when we use the word technology, we're thinking about digital tech. But once upon a time, you know, a stone and a stick was technology. There is something really interesting, I think, about how just the boundaries of what we consider tech shifts, and things move into kind of the, you know, the previous era and get forgotten or considered old-fashioned. But who knows, you know, whether there might have been something that was better once upon a time, and we've cast it into the past because it feels old, but maybe it was more effective. Yeah, we had a little bit of kind of humor the other day, wondering, well, is a TV, is that technology? What about a DVD player? Is that technology?
I mean, I blame you guys, the language teachers, because you're the ones who kind of really mucked everything up with this. I mean, that's your fault.
Yeah, so true. So true.
No, but it's true. I mean, you know, design in the States, for example, is about graphic design and computer-based design and web design. And, you know, whereas for me, it's about, you know, as I said, it's about designing. If it hasn't grown out the ground or popped out of a human, someone has sat down and sketched.
Of course, yeah, right.
And that's the enormity of the subject area. But you're absolutely right. And the language is key to this. Design for me is something which I've grown up with over 33, 34 years of teaching now, and my philosophy and whatever goes on to it. But if I meet somebody from another culture where, as you said, design is, you know, they've used, I don't know, it could be a propelling pencil. That's good technology.
Yeah, right.
But technology has been really kind of, it's a term now which is quite blasé. It's like STEM now. It's not.
Yes.
They're thrown into the arena because we're in this, you know, as I said, laptops have been around for over 30 years now. You know, technology is not about computers or anything else. And arguably in geography and physics, you teach technology more than you do.
Yeah, sure.
You know, in other areas. And I mentioned geography because of geotech and everything else. There's
absolutely,
massive
yeah.
textiles and things in there. So, yeah, there's a perception. And I think a lot of teachers are in this really, as you said, again, I don't want to, but they're very convergent in their approach to things outside of their domains. And what I love about design is we're quite open door about, we like people coming in. So some of the best work I did with, I'll introduce Richard Jones-Nerzik, who's a colleague. He's here in Switzerland now, but I work with him in Toulouse. He's a history teacher. He's the best person at using audiovisual and film and video and media in any of his work. So he was our go-to guy for that, even though he was in history. And he used a lot of those audiovisual technologies to get going. But I think the word it's been lost in the ether. It's been watered down. And I think you're absolutely right. You can debate it. Of course, is a television technology? Sure it is. Is your coffee machine in the morning, if you've got one? Yeah, that's technology. That's why I don't like it. It's become a word which is, it's like designing. Back in the 80s, Carl, and forgive me, there were these programs on UK TV. What's his name? Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen or whatever. Good design. This room was blue. Or good design. This sofa was red. Yeah. That's not design. That's just an aesthetic. It's things. And these terms, you know, especially from cultures in the States, you know, they had if you were good with your hands, you went down workshop and auto and did mechanics. And then the bright students went and did whatever. And then they realized, well, hang on, we need these two guys together. But design had been doing that. DT had been doing that for a long time. We amalgamated all those areas quite early on. And I suppose through the colonial times where we spread to, you know, Asia and things, so design technology as a subject. As I said, I sat it as an O-level, A-level back in the late 70s, early 80s. Right. So it's been around for a long time. But different cultures, different things. If you go in India now, technology, you know, it's Silicon Valley is going to overtake, you know, they are into electronic systems and control. That's their game. Yeah. They're really cool. China arguably is really textiles based now. I mean, I know there's lots of other things, but the textiles that come out of this are phenomenal. And and so these different cultures apply these different terms and things. And as I said, so it's your job as language teachers to make sure that all these students and teachers understand.
That we can actually make sure we're talking about the same thing. No, you're right. Yeah, look, I interrupted you there. I want to let you get back onto what you were saying about anthropology and the role of anthropology as a focal point. That sounded interesting.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that's come to the fore in recent years, I've been reading these books about changing cultures of thinking things. One of the things that I get really frustrated about now, especially in this position I've taken on this year, where you've got more of an overview of curriculum and what people do and the school does. we're still based on a very antiquated system of what a core curriculum is. And I don't want colleagues to be upset with me when I say this. Why are maths and science at the core? Yes, they are important, but why aren't languages? If you look at the world today, you look at history and geography, they should be right in there. Humankind, how do we treat people? How do we work with different cultures? How can we be more understanding and appreciative of what different cultures bring to the mix? And if we can't do it in schools as a starting point, that's a big issue. The other point which you hit on earlier, Carl, sorry, just quickly, was the partnership with parents. Parents play a massive role in this. You take your child and put them into a school. We're not there just to teach them how to be polite, lovely individuals. That has to start at the home. That's that kind of attitude, and the education starts at the home, which we can then nurture and work with, and come back to parents and bounce. When little Johnny's got it wrong, and you have to talk. But anthropology, I think, if that was at the core, then how we use your maths, your science, your everything else that comes into it. I think education just needs a complete kind of kick up the backside and a change.
I think so too, yeah.
And I think too, we're afraid to do it. And B, we're stuck in this route which has been all right for 200 years, why not? But if you go back to Hansard in 1860, when the original education curriculum was astounded, it was the 3 R's. It was reading, writing and
arithmetic.
And that was limited then.
Right,
and that's right at the core at the beginning. And so, obviously I'm slightly biased. So I'm being...
No.
But I think,
I mean, I mean, obviously you are biased, it is, but this is why I'm interested in talking to you, because that's something I have a sense of it as from being a student, and as I said, because of the way that I've come to think about English and languages, but it is English that really is kind of leading the fore there in methodological developments, pedagogical developments. And as I said, I've started to think about how that should be carried out outside of the English classroom and into the other subjects. It struck me very quickly that the design and the tech room was very much like that. This kind of walled in, strange part of the school that's different from all the other parts of the school, but actually shouldn't be. It should be. That should bleed out into the other subjects.
More integrated.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some other very interesting things you said. Just history. What you said about history and geography has really struck a bell with me, because geography in particular, and another thing, because as well I'm coming from a UK curriculum perspective, I've found when I've spoken to people from some other countries, they're sometimes surprised to find that for us, geography is a study of people and cultures, as well as rivers and mountains. So it's not just the geology side of it, but it is the global cultures, the peoples, the populations, and things like that. And that has always been essentially a subject of theory, an academic study, right? But there is something now, I think, much more necessarily applied about that, because for a long time, other cultures were distant ideas, and a lot of people might have never traveled in their lives, and it was entirely possible that you would just never encounter another culture, maybe a person from another culture, sure, and maybe give them a wide berth if you do, but now people are so much more unavoidably integrated, and people travel much more, that culture is something that really we do need a hands-on education with. It's not something that I think should be a theory textbook subject, but hey, you're likely to actually spend some time in another country with people from another culture, and you need to be prepared for that in a way that didn't used to be true. It was just an academic subject for exam prep, but now it's like it's a life, a real possibility in people's lives, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've made the move. I mean, you've been out, been overseas from the UK for a few years now, so you get it. But I also think, even if you don't move outside of your country, there absolutely, in any employ you go into, you will be liaising, talking, working with people from other cultures, other countries, in other languages.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is absolutely vital. And you mentioned, I did A-level geography, one of my A-levels, and I can't remember, it was socio-economic, was it? You did physical or socio-economic or whatever.
Sure.
But and that it's massively important. And actually, getting that across to students at an early age it won't eradicate, but I think it would make a lot of youngsters more tolerant of others.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah,
That's not about geography. That's in general, because if you look at most subjects, there are elements of this which you can pull to the fore. Be it,
Yeah.
I love team sport. I said I love rugby. So when you watch the Six Nations or the World Cup, it be it hockey, cricket, football, whatever, when they come together, countries get on their feet. You've got a whole mix of cultures going in. You're cheering for your team at the same time. If you go and watch a rugby game, you have a beer afterwards with people from different countries, different cultures, and it's just wonderful. You can't write that down. It's not an exam. We're doing 1.5 hours on that. It's just part of it. But to get that into school and to make it work, I think is good. And it's the teachers too. I notice it. I mean, I see it here because getting teachers to work together and be more open-minded and appreciative of each other, I think, from cultures would help us too, because, practice what you preach. If you want the kids to do it, and then, get the staff. And that education has to come from a school culture, a whole school culture. But yeah, I think we need to fundamentally relook and revamp what we do. And as yet, I'm not being dismissive of math and science. Of course, they're important, but I love the idea of parity in curriculums.
Yeah, sure. And I think as well, I mean, one of the more radical ideas that I carry with me is not so much about just shuffling the focus around, as you suggested, and I would agree with you that maybe the focus could be redressed. But I would ultimately like to see some of these boundaries just knocked down, rather than having the maths classroom where we study maths, and the science lab where we study science, and the language room where we study literature and things like that. There are so many ways that these subjects can interact with one another. I mean, even geography, just because we were talking about it a moment ago, is again triggering ideas in my head. I mean, almost every subject could incorporate aspects of geography to it. And this is another thing that, again, traveling and teaching overseas was really made me realize how kind of regional centric or local centric a curriculum is. So everything that we studied in school in the UK had a kind of a UK bent to it. So like you said, when we did sports lessons, we learned kind of common English sports, cricket and rugby and football. And then when we studied, when we studied history, it was European history. And when we studied literature, it's Shakespeare. All great, interesting stuff, but not much time. You don't spend a lot of time in your literature lesson saying, oh, and by the way, here are some examples of literature from around the world. You don't spend much time in PE saying, oh, this is, sports that they play in Asia. And you don't spend much time. And that's a way of incorporating geography into almost every subject in the curriculum, and just breaking down some of these boundaries and saying, we don't need a geography class. Can't we just study these things integrated?
Yeah, again, totally agree. We're on the same wavelength here. I was reading an article recently about Finland, their state education system. They've done away with all subjects now, and so the school day is based up on a theme, a project over a couple of weeks, and you just get on with delivering that project.
I think it makes so much sense, because that's maths.
It's applied
maths. That's what it's like when we apply it anyway, right? When we leave school and we go into the adult, the professional, the social world, it is applying multiple learnings at once, right? There is no problem that can only be solved with maths alone or something else, No, absolutely.
No, exactly. And there will be people watching this later on when they, when you finish editing and putting it online, Carl, kind of frowning at this. But of course, there has to be at an earlier age. Are you still there, sir?
Yeah, still with you.
Right, okay. And it has to be at an earlier age. We do have to give them the basic foundations of, the basics of maths, the basics of language, whatever culture you're in, the basics of science, design, the kind of key skills that they need to go. But that's, I don't know, probably between the age of 6 and maybe 10, 11, something like that. You get in a foundation, but thereafter, I suppose you're looking middle school, secondary school, I'd love to see, as I said, it becomes project-based, where you're applying the stuff that you learn. And there are elements where you tease out and focus on key aspects of things to help further the understanding and knowledge of the students. But the idea, as you said, students think education runs as a double period there for geography on a Wednesday morning, a triple period of design on a Thursday. And that's not, and then suddenly they're thrust into university or the world of work, where it's a completely different setup. So I think we do need to review it, but it's going to take a brave soul at some point to actually make the decision. And I think the COVID situation may force some exam providers to review, you go, exam provider, it's an exam. Do we,
Yeah, yeah.
we want to be able to assess and see how much knowledge a student has learned and how they apply it.
Yeah, I
But
mean, how well are they prepared for the particular job that they're applying for? I mean, that reminds me of something that came up right at the beginning of this call when you were talking about that idea earlier. A lot of students are now worried because they are not going to be taking the exams that they were gearing up to take, and they're worried about how that might impact their access to university, for example. But it seems that the obvious solution to that is for the universities to be the ones that take the initiative and say, okay, look, maybe we don't need to require the exam, because as long as the universities are requiring the exam, then that pressure remains. But as soon as the universities say, oh, maybe we can manage our admissions without the exam, as soon as that happens, it gives a lot of freedom then to reassess the way that we look at assessment. And the same for the work. Employers spend a lot of their time kind of counting degrees, but anybody who spends any time in the workplace, learns and realizes pretty quickly that the degree is not the operative, the operative bit of knowledge or background that you have when it comes to actually succeeding in your work. And if somebody could spend a little bit more time finding out from the employers and from the university admissions, okay, what do you really need from the students? What do they need to bring to the table so that they are prepared to work in this environment or to study at this level? And how can the schools spend more time focusing on preparing the students with those skills and abilities? Surely that would be a revolutionary approach.
Yeah, evolution or revolution, I'm not sure, but you're right.
Yeah, you're right, I think. Yeah, it's a valid question.
It's a good point. But one of the things, again, which I've noticed recently in my career is how students actually, although they enjoy certain subjects, the subjects become very much a background noise to, do I pass them to get on to the next stage to university?
Yes,
and
that's exactly right, yeah.
The embracing of the subjects that they've done, did they enjoy it? Did they not? They don't even look at it. They just say, oh, did I get a B plus or whatever the hell it is? Can I move on to the next stage? And the university thing is a really good point, I think, because I see it more and more that it's not so much. Obviously, if you want to, there are certain career paths that you go into where you need certain subjects because of the knowledge that they provide to facilitate you moving on. I'm thinking, veterinary surgeon or what have you. But for most, I get really frustrated that, I've got friends and colleagues who went through, Oxbridge or Russell Group universities,
sure,
did science, and then just bounced into the city and were starting playing, working with numbers, and never even applied any of their physics or chemistry or whatever they.
No.
And that seems
it's just an exercise in ticking boxes. It seems a lot of the time.
That's 12 years of education, be it school and
yeah, absolutely,
yeah. Out the line, I've studied all this, I've done science, I've done physics. You've given me a lot of knowledge there, guys. Thank you. I'm now going to go and work out what shared dividend is going to work over here.
Yeah.
And I'm not using any of my physics at all.
Yeah.
And that
right.
needs a fundamental change, and that is driven by tertiary education. And they need to change. Now, it's not all, but I think there's still this, again, like our curriculums in schools, the way in which universities, not just in the UK, I think the UK, the States, we need to look, or they need to look and review who's the best person to do this course and what skills and attributes do they bring to the table. And for me, it's absolutely hits nail on the head when I see all these blip adverts now for automatic sorting of CVs, OCR scanning. People, there's no human resource department now. They just flip, ding, ding. Well, that's saying that actually, just that piece of paper, nothing of the education, that lump behind.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah,
it's not worth for what you're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yeah,
it's a waste of our time. Let's forget schools. Let's go sit in the beach, have a beer, and teach them beach volleyball. If that's what they want.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, but fundamentally, we need to change.
Yeah. So I want to try and get back as well on that idea then of if we can get some specific examples. I don't know if you've spent much time thinking about it, but what kind of things would you like to see from from design as a subject or from the design classroom? What are some things that you would like to see carried into other subjects that you think are part of the design curriculum, the design syllabus, that could contribute positively or could add some value or enhance the learning process outside of the design classroom as well in other subjects?
Cool. Yeah, good question, Carl. I mean, two things I think. So I'm just thinking about.
No, take your time, yeah.
The design process as such, where it starts with a problem or a need or a brief. I mean, I think that is fundamental. And actually, most subjects do that. They start with that kind of principle. You know, we have a problem, we have a need, we need to solve this problem. How do we get there? But the way in which you do it in design, I think, could well support and help scaffold a lot of the way other teachers and other subjects do it. I think there's synergy there, massive synergy. I think that could be really useful. And the other thing I think is at the kind of research stage of most design-based projects or briefs that are presented, it's looking at the nature of that research. And I think the key thing for me there is educating students on how to listen. So listening to understand rather than listening to reply. And I'm using that term more and more now because students in the research phase need to get a really good fundamental understanding of what the problem is. And I think that's something that could be shared all over the place. You know, I had one the other day. It was on an extended essay. It was psychology of color, and you know, Toyota in Australia engineer. There's more money spent on the smell and the color of the car interior than there is on the mechanics and the other side of it. Because a car in Australia, when you open the door, has to smell and feel a certain way, different to Japan, different to the UK. And that psychology of things is massive, and that has massive overlap into other areas of the curriculum. The STEM thing really bugs me a little bit because they threw these subjects together to try and give it some academic kudos. Sort of a cluster of subjects. And as much as I admire that, design technology has done that for a long time. But the idea of interdisciplinary work, I think, is absolutely spot on. But why exclude, as you said, history, geography, sports? Whatever it is. And that
it seems to me, and I don't have any direct contact with that set of subjects really. I'm quite ignorant really to what goes on in those classrooms, to be honest. But it did seem to me, it's maybe five years or so ago, when this STEM really began to, you know, be a widespread term and became a bit of a buzzword quite quickly. It seemed to me then a bit of a misthrow. Because what I would have liked to have seen then was an attempt to bring STEM principles into other subjects as a way of making STEM more central to the curriculum, rather than walling them off and saying, you know, here's this little isolated section called STEM, which is special and very important and separate from the rest of the curriculum. And it created kind of a chasm between the STEM subjects and the other subjects. I would have liked to have seen then an integration.
I agree. I mean, you could have been Higler, which was history, geography, languages. I can't remember. Another cluster of subjects which was given this opportunity, and it was driven by an ignorance in many ways. I think an ignorance by government thinking these are academic technology coming into it again. This has got to, we've got to drive this and get our students all doing this. Well, actually, no, you don't. Your levels of applying and using technology and your levels of teaching aspects of technology in curriculum terms are actually quite good. What you need to do is review, the central pool, as you hit on earlier, of actually what we offer. So STEM's been more divisive, I think, than it has. There's no business in it, there's no design, no art, there's no language. That's ridiculous. They got it wrong, but hopefully they'll learn from that. And again, I think STEM, I'm happy to be proved wrong. I think, again, it came from the United States, where they didn't have design and technology. So the STEM ideal came from there. MIT. MIT put some money into it in the curriculum base, and it kind of bounced, and someone in the UK took it on. At a time, design was in a bit of a low ebb. Governments championed it, massive in the 90s. We talked about Dyson and Johnny Ive at Apple Mac.
I remember those a lot.
All those things probably from school, if you remember.
I do. Yeah, we had that. Was it Stark or something? That one. On a book. Oh, really? That's that one thing that just sticks in my mind. That seemed like such an important thing. Oh, Philip Stark, he made that lemon squeezer.
There you go. And it's funny enough, he popped up on one of my Twitter feeds recently as 10 items that no one knew what they were, and one of them was that juicy salad. So we've gone full cycle. It was the world's worst design, but it became
Right.
iconic because it looked cool, but it
Right.
didn't produce. And that's where Philippe Stark came in with his,
Right, I see.
and he reinvented himself as a consequence of that, because he was making things that look cool and didn't work. And now he
Right,
does
I
some
see.
work which are
Oh,
well
interesting.
engineered.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it's a good example. But you see, that's a good example. You know, Philippe Stark, French guy, product industrial designer, designs boats, ships, buildings, hotels, complete architecture, maths, science, you know, complete cross curriculum.
Right. Yeah. Right.
A good example of where design you can
Yeah.
start
No.
with a focus.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing, which it just hit on me there, Carl, is that many people forget the biggest kind of wealth creators in the world for any GDP in any country is food and drink and textiles. And
Sure.
that's, you know, and we used to do a lot of it in schools. Now we don't seem to do as much as we should. And they are key. You
Absolutely.
know, they
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
still massive drivers financially and for
Yeah.
employment and everything else
Yeah.
globally. Absolutely global.
Yeah.
We don't do that in schools.
No,
Why
I
is
do
that?
think there's a again, it's another gap that's very apparent in the system. I think is there are things being taught in school that I don't know if it's a kind of, I don't know if it's aspirational or if it's idealistic or if it's something else. But there is a gap between what many of the students are realistically, if we're all being honest with ourselves, actually going to, you know, move into when they leave school. And it's true that certain fields are shrinking. So, you know, the manual labor, the menial labor, manufacturing, these are shrinking as workplaces, perhaps as you know, the number of jobs are perhaps decreasing, but there's still going to be a lot of the students that graduate this year, you know, are still going to end up in those kinds of jobs. And they're not, you know, it's kind of, school doesn't do anything about those because they're, I don't know if they're seen as lowly or whatever else. So a lot of the students who realistically are not going to be designing the next lemon squeezer, but that's what they're being taught, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the business acumen behind it, I think, which plays a big role as well, Carl. I mean, we're coming back again at maths. I think of maths, I didn't enjoy maths at school until later on when I kind of clicked and I understood it. But it was applying the maths to problem solving, which made it interesting for me. Not just rote learning of maths because Pythagoras is that's it. But how does that work in a context? That's for me where science and maths has its role in the bigger picture within schools.
No, that's good. Yeah.
And I think it's like, again, with language is exactly the same. How do you apply language to help you progress?
So that's one of the main things that I've been trying to carry outside of the language classroom. And you bring up maths. Maths has been my biggest challenge for two reasons. One, because I'm not very good at it. So that provides or presents a big challenge for me. But also, you know, one of the main things I work with teachers on is applying their learning. And so this is something that is integral to the EFL classroom, but is less incorporated to varying degrees in other subjects. And the kind of the farthest kind of polar opposite seems to be maths, because it is so theoretical. But you know, it all exists for a reason. That maths, there are jobs that require maths, and there are interests and professions and hobbies that require maths. And anything, I still insist, and it takes a bit of time because I can't provide the examples. So I always have to tease examples out of the math teachers who know more than I do. But we always get there in the end. You know, I'm always able eventually to tease out from them an example where this piece of maths that seems incredibly theoretical, there is somebody somewhere who is using it, right? There's somebody somewhere who is applying that to their job or to some problem. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. We wouldn't have it as a subject. Nobody would have done that calculation if there wasn't a prompt, if there wasn't a reason to do it. And math seems to be kind of the farthest outpost for me, because I can see much more clearly how other subjects are applied. Maths is a little bit beyond my understanding, and so I find that the hardest one to exemplify. But when I spend time talking with maths teachers, we always get there in the end. Yep, maths is just as applicable as any other subject, and yet most subjects don't spend a lot of time on application.
That's your point there, Carl. It's as applicable as any other subject. And that parity curriculum to me, I don't understand why maths and science and certain other subjects will have 5 or 6 periods of time at that level.
Sure.
Now there's only 2 or 3.
Sure.
And if you take design, for example, most students start design at the age of 12 or 13 if they're lucky in Kung Fu.
Yeah, that's right.
You already had 7 or 8 years of maths and science.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
You already got a head start. So why is that different? Same with languages. Depending on
foreign languaguages, definitely. Yeah.
And that all comes into the mix. Looking at that and seeing how it works. There was one point you just said then about I've forgotten. It'll come back to me. But maths. I mean, maths for me, there's a lot of maths which is taught in schools because it's in the textbook, and that's going to. Yes. I'm probably going to get shot down in flames for that. We do this because it's there. We do it before. We certainly don't laugh at this. We had electricity when I left school, but we had the old manual tills. But someone comes in, and I used to work as a student to make some money, work in a pub. And so the mental maths you did on the trot when someone's shouting at you for a couple of beers or gin and tonic, and you've got to add it all up to give them the money, take the change. That really, for me, forced me into a mental arithmetic, which I haven't experienced at school. But now, work now has been really applicable and really useful. I can't remember much of my SMP maths that I've applied other than through my teaching design and technology, because it was needed, because it said in the syllabus, you've got to apply this. And that's where the IDO came in with the diploma, because the core math studies you do has to be applied in all the subjects around the hexagon. And so there's a need to do it. But what thereafter, I'm not, again, I see maths, I get it. But I do question, we come back to this, what is the core curriculum in schools?
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's we're talking and just questioning things. All of the subjects are important. None of them leave the curriculum.
No. And also, I mean,
don't have.
Yeah, I think that potentially, the reason that you're questioning that, because this is the conclusion that I've come to. The reason that you're questioning the importance that's placed on, or the value of some of these things in maths, because I certainly felt that way. I think that potentially the reason for that is simply because when we were taught those things in the maths class, the teachers never bothered to tell us that this is what it's used for. It was taught to us as something in the textbook. So when we look back at it and say, we only learned it because it was in the textbook, well, we were only taught it as though it was a thing in the textbook. But if the teacher had spent, 5 minutes, I had one recently, I observed a lesson recently, and it was incredibly theoretical, and it was way beyond my maths ability. And it was logarithms, I think. And I sort of went to the teacher afterwards, after the lesson. I said, look, put me in my place, because I don't know what I'm talking about as far as the subject goes. But is there not some way that we can find an application for this? It's all X's and Y's, and it's all, sort of incredibly complex maths on the paper. It's the kind of stuff you'd look at and it looks like foreign language. I said, but there must be. And it took a while. We kind of thought, and he said, okay, if somebody is working on oil fields at sea, and they're working on the drills, you need to use logarithms for. He lost me. I'll be honest. He lost me a little bit. But I immediately thought, isn't that infinitely more interesting if you just told the students that during the lesson? Oh, by the way, there's this guy out, miles out to sea on a platform using these for this. Isn't that infinitely more interesting? And wouldn't that make the subject seem more valuable than just saying, here's, page 15 in the textbook, and we've got to complete it before the end of the week,
You're giving it a real world application. And you remind me of a teacher I saw in a school once, and it was brilliant. They were doing their maths through origami. So it was the art of folding paper and everything. But then once they unfolded, they then went into the angles. And
wow, yeah, okay.
And it was really cool because the kids were doing something really interactive and fun, and making swans or whatever, those, pick a letter type things, all that type of stuff. But then they were recording the maths. So when you opened up these beautiful sculptures, the maths was written, they were measuring angles and doing it. And it was just a really cool way of putting it into a context.
I like it,
If you didn't increase that to that angle, the thing wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And I think that's why design works, because most of the stuff works. We said earlier, one of the things about my subject, which I think is really good, is how you can apply a lot of the stuff. I'm not talking about your manufacture and things, but a lot of the thought process, you can apply it in other areas. And how can we solve that? How we can look at it from a different standpoint. Yeah. I think, it's not, this is, rather than asking why, you say, why not? Let's go.
Yeah, right. And there's also something I think interesting, and this is another thing that I've been spending a lot of time talking about and thinking about lately, is the the limitation that we have in a lot of subjects when it comes to answers to questions, and the correct answer being the one that you're going to get the marks for. There's something again unique about the tech and design as a subject, where when you start a new unit, you start a new project, start a new process, you start on day one by introducing maybe a technique or a new tool, new piece of equipment, new process, and at that point, at that moment when you introduce the new topic or the new unit, you have no idea where it's going to take each student, because every student 2 or 3 weeks from now they're going to present you with a different product. And that's something else that you don't see in other subjects, because when you introduce the new unit in most subjects, at the moment you introduce it, exactly what every student's going to be producing by the end of that lesson or by the end of that unit. And there's something else there that I think makes tech kind of unique, that I'd like to see incorporated elsewhere, I think.
I think you're again, a good point, and I agree with you. I mean, over the years of teaching, thousands of different projects across kind of like GCSE and A-level, diploma, what have you. The outcomes are different, and that's also driven two ways. Certainly at sixth form level, because the student has to go out and find a client who gives them the area to work on.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The student has no idea what they're going to come back with. So if someone says, "Look, I've got this orthodontist brace, and I need a secure way of keeping it hygienically by my bedside,"
right?
Boom! Wow, I've got to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
I want a new chair for my lounge. I'm being
it's exactly right. Yeah.
But then the student has to go and do that research and analysis, and that is massively important. And if it's in maths, if the problem is, if you start off by sitting on a piece of furniture and it collapses,
right,
the easiest way to evaluate it is by it failing, and then we can drag things to it to work out, well, why did that happen? Slow-mo video, look at it, loading, and that application of science and maths, I think, is really cool. And in design, that's done all the time. But it's not done necessarily in a lot of other stuff. There's some very good teachers out there doing this type of stuff.
Of course, yeah.
But it's the way in which it's done. And as I said, the way they're we don't have to call them maths and physics and stuff. We could, as you said earlier, that global project idea. There has to be at the beginning, like your driving test. You need to learn how to do things basic and first of all.
Yeah, it's got to be there.
The foundation at an early age.
Yeah.
But thereafter, where they run with it, that's exciting.
Yeah.
But the thing that stops this, Carl, I think, in its tracks, is because there are people out there who think it has to be assessed in some way, and that assessed means you've got to hang a grade or a mark off it.
Yeah.
Now, yes, you do, but it doesn't have to be a grade or a mark. I don't know.
No.
Lots of ways to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm exploring a few, and I'll be having a conversation later this week, I think, with somebody who's I think either a proponent or leading the gradeless movement in
Okay, cool.
I think the UK.
What, assessment and curriculum, just assessment and
just kind of moving that conversation forward, basically, getting more and more teachers involved in just going gradeless and looking at ways of assessing that don't involve grades. Tech, though, again, seems like if you were to graduate from school and apply for a job that was tech oriented or design oriented, and when you apply for the job, you go to the interview or you submit your CV or whatever. Tech, again, gives you that position where you could submit your grade, your transcript, and say, oh, I got an A- in tech. Or you could present a portfolio and say, this is what I made in my tech classes. This is what I made at school. And here's what I produced. And this is what you're getting if you hire me, rather than here's a letter on a piece of paper and this is what you're getting if you hire me. Tech, again, seems to have, there's something very tangible there that in other subjects we do just see the product is a grade, where tech is not like that. The product is a product.
To a certain extent, I think, Carl, but the product you can throw away. It's the journey of how you got there.
That's I agree.
What sells you to the people. The product is actually, the product's not important, but that portfolio, that storybook, how you got there, the highs, the lows, experimentation of things, that storybook is what makes design a little bit special with it. And I'll go back to maths again in a second. Sorry, just
please.
actually don't care about the answer being correct. It's the working out and how you got
Yes,
there.
that is true. That is
Why in
true.
an exam situation, quite often you can get
Show you
almost
working.
marks
Yeah.
by showing you working.
Yeah. No, that is true. That is true.
And that's a good analogy in a way, actually.
Yeah, no, that is true. I wonder, do you do that with your projects? So this is something I did. It's a while back now that I was teaching in the college level, and I did a project with my students, and I asked them. They had about 3 or 4 weeks to work on it, and I asked them to basically keep a journal, to record videos a couple of times a week, just a little talking to the camera, talking about what they had found difficult whilst they were working on their project, and how they had overcome the challenges. And so by the end of the unit, by assessment period, they submitted their project, or they did a performance, or they submitted some product that they'd created, but they also submitted their learning journal, or whatever you call it, where I was then able to take a look at the process. I was able to see what kind of things they'd found difficult along the way and how they'd overcome those challenges. Do you do anything like that, where the students are keeping track of their progress that way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's actually an assessed part of the portfolios.
Okay.
So the annotation is one thing, but also the evaluation, the key points going through the design process. So if you've got 5 or 6 or 7 iterations of an idea, the evaluation of those ideas, why you've made those decisions, questionnaires for clients, you have to evaluate the feedback. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, and it's a good point, Clark. It's something, I think some subjects do it quite a lot now. Design does it it has to be done, because if you don't do it, you don't get the marks.
Right. Okay.
Which goes against our argument about the grading, but that's
sure
where we are. But yes, the students are encouraged to very much so to evaluate various steps through the process and what went well and what didn't go well. And there's no hang up about if something didn't work or it failed. That's quite cool. We can evaluate. I'm not, I'm not into this "it's okay to fail" jargon.
No, nor am I. That's another one of my controversial points.
But there's a point about we could reevaluate and see if we can improve upon what we just did.
Yeah,
that's slightly different. But okay to fail? No. If something
fails,
no,
I definitely am on board with the idea that failure is a part of the process. But there is you get a lot of these kind of inspirational quotes on watercolor backgrounds talking about how failure is, and I agree with you. Failure is kind of being lionized a little bit of late, I think, which I don't agree with. But accepting failures.
Go on, sorry.
No, you say?
Yeah. Do you have any pet hates or know something? One of mine is thinking outside the box. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I also
got to think inside the box. You have to focus on certain things.
I think thinking. In fact, you mentioned it before. I think I saw in a comment somewhere. I like thinking outside the box as a concept. What I don't like, and I think we might be in agreement here. What I don't like is the idea that thinking outside the box is the good thing, and thinking inside the box is the bad thing, and you're weaker and less creative and all that if you think inside the box. But of course, you have to have a box, and you have to spend some time in it before you can do anything creative and effective outside the box. So it's another case very similar to what we were talking about with the curriculum and the parity and subject. It's another of those cases where both of these things are important and both of these things need to be developed, but some kind of priority is given to the one that seems cooler and more valuable, and it kind of undermines the value of the other. I think thinking inside the box, if nobody was thinking inside the box, where would we be? I think that would be problematic.
There are times when you have to drill down and actually focus on key things.
Absolutely,
but they're parameters more than a box. And what's a box? So
exactly. No, completely.
It does not go down there. But but it's the parameters that are set. That's the thing. And sometimes you have to think outside of those parameters to make it. So you take Dyson, you took the jet engine, Whittle's jet engine, and the idea of cleaning your lounge floor, and then put these things together to create this cyclonic cleaner. Now, boom, that was thinking outside of normal parameters.
Yeah.
But then when you break down, you have to focus on key details.
Just wouldn't have worked it wouldn't have worked if you just kind of come in and said, I've got this great idea, jet engines, cleaning floors, and you'd end up with a jet engine inside the living room. You've got to then spend some time in the box, as it were. Absolutely.
What's the other one? The new normal, that drives me nuts too.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
TV with the government things. This is the new normal. Please be quiet.
Yeah, no one. I'm with you on that one. Most of those, and I was just trying to think of one there. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but most of them are things that people say about teaching. There's a lot of kind of quips and kind of trendy, buzzy phrases and terms about teaching, and teachers, the idea that, whether it's teaching as a facilitator. There are various things out there where, again, core principles I'm on board with, but the way that they're presented as pithy little kind of axioms, I often it takes an idea that's valuable and puts it in some kind of special platform where I tend to think it's missing the point, but it sounds cool, and you put it with a picture of a cat and people love it.
or a puppy. Yeah, we need to get rid of the jargon from education.
Yeah,
and,
that's it.
But we fundamentally, coming back, I think design has a key role to play at the core of a curriculum. So do languages, so does maths, everything else. That's what I find really frustrating, that there's still a perception that certain subjects are more important than others or have greater value. And I think we need to just get a level playing field.
Yeah.
And then go again. The problem we have with that are the teachers that deliver their subjects, because we all champion our subjects as, my subject is so important and everything.
Sure.
That's one thing, that ideal. And also, because the way our curriculums are biased, we give more time to certain subjects. And I have no idea why. Over the past 100 years, I've got no understanding why, because at the end of it, they all sit these exams or assessments.
Yeah.
So we go. Suddenly we have parity again, and I just don't.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, still sitting
get it.
in silence for an hour taking a test paper. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Is there anything you think we've missed? Anything you want to touch on?
There's lots of things, but I think what we could do, Carl, if you're okay with it, is maybe 6 months or later on, or
I quite like to actually. Yeah.
If you could revisit and do a part two, based on what we hear in the feedback, I think that'd be quite cool, because I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, good. Yeah, no, thanks as well. Me too.
It's getting the dialogue, but I think we've hit on several things. We could, it'd be interesting to see your chat with this guy or girl on the assessment and what they think about. I've certainly got thoughts and ideas, being in this school where we are currently now, where we have international and national systems working hand in hand, and the expectation, I think, from parents as much as from the school as to how subjects are delivered. As you said. Right. So I think there's lots we could revisit.
No, cool. I'd be very happy to. And I'd also, the hope, of course, as this, hopefully grows a little bit, is that, you and I have a conversation here. But I want it to be a start to I want to see people talking about the conversation. I want to see more in the comments. I want to see more responses. And so hopefully, if that comes to pass, then there'll be some feedback and some comments and things following this. I hope that maybe you and I can then come back and respond to in the future, maybe.
Of course. I mean, we'll spread the word. Social media is going to be our friend in this, in terms of
I think so,
perpetuating that conversation.
And,
in education, we're not talking about, Kim Kardashian or whatever. So we don't suddenly get 4.5 million hits because you mentioned the name.
No.
You could do the fluffy puppy or the little
yeah. Next time I do the conversation, I'll just have a little cat sitting here for the whole conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Or One Direction or whatever the hell's
popular. Yeah.
K-pop. There you go. That's what we need.
Yeah.
So we'll get that in. But no, absolutely. That we spread it. I think slowly. I mean, it's your fourth one, I think, isn't it, Carl? I can't remember now.
This will be up as number 3 or 4. Yeah.
So we're slowly generating that interest, and I certainly will. Help support you with that. I think it's a really cool idea, just to get discussion going, because from the discussions we get the ideas.
That's right. Yeah. Definitely. Something comes up that neither of us had thought about. Something always comes up. Hey, before I forget, we can talk about this later. But before I forget, you mentioned a history teacher that you'd worked with earlier on. I wonder if he'd be interested in doing one of these as well, because I think
he would love to. I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'll
that'd be great.
Details.
Brilliant. All right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that you want to send people? Anywhere people should come and look for you, or anything that you're working on that people can look at?
No, I can post on. I'm big on social media with Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn.
Okay, so I'll put all of your links underneath the video later. People can find.
Yeah, well, I'll pop them through to you, so you've got them, and you can embed them as you see fit.
Yeah, will do. Brilliant. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, wonderful. I think we've got it, Dave.
Fantastic, Carl. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you
and as
too.
I said, let's do another one soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Dave.
All the best. Good evening. Bye now.